Welcome everybody. It's so wonderful to be here on this Halloween Eve with all of you. Hi, my name is Deb Clearwaters. I'm the Director of Education and Interpretation at the Asian Art Museum, and it's my honor to welcome all of you to this Scary Art and Stories program. I want to acknowledge that although I'm meeting with you from Oakland, California, the Asian Art Museum sits on the San Francisco Peninsula and is located within the occupied territories of the Ohlone peoples. We remember their continued connection to this region and give thanks to them for allowing us to live, work, and learn on their traditional homeland. We offer our respect to the elders and to all Indigenous peoples, past and present. Welcome everyone to this Halloween Eve Scary Art and Stories program, a sort of creature feature featuring art and stories from the Asian Art Museum. Some of you may recall back in Golden Gate Park, the museum held scary stories in the galleries with our storytellers. They had us turn down the lights and we told scary tales in the galleries. Every culture has ghost stories that chill us and powerful art that will protect us and fend away evil. Throughout this program, I invite you to use the chat, which is at the bottom of your screen, hopefully somewhere on your screen. And you can use that to just comment, chime in, tell us how you're celebrating Halloween this year. Obviously, we're all having to change our traditions to adapt. And also, you can use the Q&A to ask questions. We'll have time for questions at the end of the program. But we really encourage you to communicate with everybody at the webinar on the chat. And, as I was preparing for this program, I wanted to do a little bit of research because, I'm an American kid and a lot of us don't really know how Halloween got started. I think of it as a time of candy, which was a very joyful time for me. So I did some research, and many of you probably know this, that Halloween traces its origins to ancient Britain and Ireland and the festival of Samhain. In our calendars, this would fall on November 1st, considered the beginning of the new year and also the beginning of winter. And during this festival, the souls of those who had died are believed to return to their homes. And those who had died during the year are believed to journey to the other world. And as many of you who have celebrated the Day of the Dead, this is a tradition that is ongoing. But it also aligns with other traditions in other parts of the world. And witches, hobgoblins, fairies, and demons came to be associated with Samhain. And the period was also thought to be a good time to get your fortune told and to decide on matters such as marriage, health, and dying. So I'm curious how your family is celebrating Halloween this year. If you want to tell us a little bit about that, please write to us in the chat. And if you're interested in finding out more about Day of the Dead, a virtual Day of the Dead celebration, I'm going to post in the chat a link to the Day of the Dead SF.org. And that is that should be an interesting experience to visit virtually. So tonight we have three wonderful presenters, storytellers and school program docents, Rupa Mohan and Linda Yamoto, and docent Larry Mock. And I'd like to get right into our very first story. Rupa recorded this story in advance, but she is here tonight to tell us a little bit more about it after we watch the video. And this story comes from ancient Puranic texts of India. She's going to be using some body language in the story, so I encourage you to watch that and try them out yourself. And we'll talk a little bit about that when after the story. So let me share my screen and play the video. Here's Rupa.
Namaste, greetings. I am Rupa Mohan and I am a storyteller at the Asian Art Museum. Today I'd like to tell you a scary story from Hindu mythology called Prahalada and Narasimha. The main characters in this story are Brahma, the god of creation, Vishnu, the god of protection or preservation. Hiranyakashipu, a demon king, and Prahalada, his little son, who is the hero of our story. Well, a very, very long time ago, Hiranyakashipu wanted to rule the entire universe, and he was very angry with Vishnu, who had killed his demon brother in an effort to retrieve Mother Earth from his clutches. Hiranyakashipu wanted revenge, and he went to the forest. He stood on one leg and he went into a deep penance or meditation for a very long time until he attracted the attention of Brahma, who came down and offered him a boon. Well, the demon king was very cunning and he wanted immortality, but that could not be granted to men or demons, and so he asked for something else. All he wanted, he said, was not to be killed under these conditions by man or god or beast during the day or during the night, inside or outside his house, or by any man-made or god-made weapon. Well, Brahma was a little puzzled but granted him the boon, and Hiranyakashipu went home very happy and pleased with himself. He knew he was on the path of immortality, and he went on a rampage. First of all, he banned Vishnu from his entire kingdom, replacing Vishnu's idols with his own. And everybody had to only worship him, not even utter the name of Vishnu. And people who did not listen to this were all thrown into the deepest, darkest dungeons. Well, this demon king had a rather pious and gentle wife who, when she was pregnant, had heard chants of Vishnu. She was into yoga, and when she had her baby boy, she was so happy that she named him Prahalada, or boundless joy. In fact, he was a good little boy, but very soon as he started speaking, his first words were, Vishnu, Vishnu. What? Why am I hearing Vishnu from our son? Wife, haven't I told you that this is banned from my kingdom? Wash out his mouth and make sure he never utters that word again. His wife tried, but Prahalada was growing up to be a worshipper of Vishnu, and very soon he started praying to Vishnu. Om Hari Narayana, Om Vishnu, Om Vishnu. His father was getting angrier and angrier. He shook him and said, Son, don't do that. Vishnu is my biggest enemy. He slapped him. He sent him to a school, ordering the teachers to brainwash him. They tried, but soon Prahalada was leading his classmates in a chant for Vishnu. Narayana Vishnu, Narayana Vishnu, Narayana Vishnu, Narayana, Narayana Vishnu, Narayana. Oh, stop, cried the teachers. We are going to be in big trouble. And they were both beheaded by the demon king. Oh, what do I do? Cried the wife. She did not know how to change Prahalada. And Hiranyakashipu was getting more and more angry. He wanted to start using serious threats. He sent him down with his soldiers to look at the plight of those Vishnu worshippers who are being tortured and beaten. But Prahalada felt sorry for them and started praying and singing Vishnu's praises along with them. Why are you doing this? Cried Hiranyakashipu. You are my father. I respect you. But Vishnu is my God. He is all over. And how can I not see that? Ugh! Hiranyakashipu was getting angrier and angrier, and he decided to use some even more serious threats. Soldiers, take Prahalada to that tall cliff in our kingdom and throw him down. He thought that such threats would make his son change his mind, but Prahalada went into the prayer pose as he was thrown down that steep cliff into the raging river underneath. But by some miracle, the river became very calm and it cushioned him as he landed. And Prahalada went back home safe, much to the joy of his mother. What? Have you changed your mind? No, father, I think Vishnu saved me. Ugh! Soldiers, take him to that pit of poisonous snakes. I'm sure that cobra will sting him and kill him. Well, the soldiers dropped him into that pit with hissing snakes of all sizes and shapes, squirting venom everywhere. But when Prahalada landed, they all calmed down, and the biggest cobra made a bed for him and protected him. And another snake became a flower garland that adorned his neck. Prahalada went back home, much to the joy of his mother. What? You are back? Yes, father. I think Vishnu saved me again. Ugh! Soldiers, call my sister Holika. Well, Holika was Hiranyakashipu's dear sister, and she had been granted a boon where she could not be destroyed by fire. She also had a special shawl that she could wear that was fire resistant. Well, Holika was ordered to sit with Prahalada on her lap, and as she held him, a bonfire was lit around them. The flames soon rose to the sky, smoke filling the air, and everybody stood in horror. And Prahalada's mother was weeping uncontrollably. But guess what? When the flames subsided and the fire died down, they noticed that Prahalada was alive and well, seated like this with the shawl around him. But there was no sign of his aunt Holika. Oh, what happened to my sister? What happened to her? Cried Hiranyakashipu. You are evil. No, father, I didn't do anything. I just prayed to God Vishnu. Hiranyakashipu was inconsolable after the loss of his sister Holika. He decided to take matters into his own hands. I don't trust anybody anymore. I am going to finish the job. He dragged his son Prahalada and went into his palace and tied him to a big marble pillar. He sharpened his weapons and he was ready to kill his biggest enemy, his son. Meanwhile, Prahalada stood there peacefully as always, deep in prayer. Is your Vishnu going to save you now? Let us see. Bah, he said, and he kicked the pillar. Father, Vishnu is everywhere. Is he in this pillar? Yes, Father, he is in the pillar and he is even in a speck of dust. Ha 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 ha! Let's see if he comes and saves you. And he advanced to his son, ready to kill him. And then the earth started rumbling. The pillar started moving, and very soon cracks were formed and it split open, releasing Prahalada to safety. And out of it emerged with a roar, a big, incredible figure nobody had ever seen before, with the face of a lion and the body of a man, with the longest claws and a long mane, trembling with anger. This was Narasimha, an avatar of Vishnu. Yes, Prahallada's beloved Vishnu, who had come down to save him and to save humanity. It advanced, towering over Hiranyakashipu, and said, "Enough, enough. Are you willing to change now and be kind?" "Bah! No, I am here to kill you," said the arrogant Hiranyakashipu. And then Narasimha, this avatar of Vishnu, advanced towards him, very easily picked him up like a rag doll and took him to the threshold, neither inside nor outside the palace. He got into a half-seated stance, this lion man, and then he took out his claws, ready for the final step. It was neither day nor night, but dusk, and Narasimha plunged his claws inside Hiranyakashipu and tore him. And soon his guts were out and blood was squirting out, and everybody watched in horror while Hiranyakashipu whimpered and moaned. And soon he was a dead demon. The people cheered and prayed and thanked Vishnu for bringing them salvation. Meanwhile, Prahallada continued to sit deep in prayer. But Narasimha was still raging with anger, divine anger. And the gods did not know what to do. The whole universe seemed to be trembling. Prahallada got up and in his sweet voice started singing again. Shirapti Shayana Narasimha, Sri Lakshmi Ramana Narasimha, Shirapti Shayana Narasimha, Sri Lakshmi Ramana Narasimha. And miraculously, Narasimha calmed down and became his benevolent and calm self. He blessed Prahallada, urging him to rule kindly and justly and to bring peace and harmony back to his kingdom and to the entire world. Thank you.
Yay! That is such a great story. Such a wonderful telling, Rupa. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask everybody to do your best dead demon. That's so great. Do you want to tell us more about some of the gestures that you used?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to show you. This is the shawl that I inherited from Holika, the one that's survived the fire.
Nice. That's very convenient, especially with what California has been going through lately.
Hopefully it'll protect me, and if anybody is welcome to borrow it. Yeah, so I started out with some gestures based on mudras from classical dance, in especially South Indian dance. And so we have Vishnu with his conch and his disc. We have Brahma holding a rosary and with the Vedas. He was the one who came up with the Vedas. So this is the symbol or the gesture. Then we have the water. And when they become turbulent, they go like this. And when it can become a snake, then of course we have the final, the namaste, which is a sign of peace, which we all need now. And that can become harmony. It all together, right?
That's so wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I hope everyone was following along. There's so many appreciations in the chat, Rupa. People are just loving that story. So good job. And someone says it was their favorite childhood story, and love your facial expressions, and love the lovely dress and great contrast to your background. Beautiful. So wonderful comments. Thank you all. Let's see, let me get back to my run of show here. So as you have questions, if you have any questions, feel free to park them into the Q&A, and we'll get to those a little bit later. And now we're going to hear from Larry Mock. And Larry's going to tell us about spirits associated with art and architecture. Now, you all know about haunted houses. Well, what about haunted museums? So Larry is going to give us a talk, and he's going to show us some of the powerful art in the museum.
Hello, everybody. And if you look outside your window, you notice it's getting dark now. My name is Larry Mock, and I'm a docent at the Asian Art Museum. But let's visit the Asian Art Museum virtually, if not in person, because the museum's closed. And it's a very special night, a very, very special night, Halloween Eve night. And as it's getting dark, it's believed that on Halloween, the barrier that separates the world of the dead and the world of the living is starting to dissolve. So even tonight, I think the spirits are starting to get ready to enter our world. But let's look at the Asian Art Museum and imagine for a moment that you are totally absorbed in a project and you think you're alone, and then you suddenly felt there's somebody there, and then you turn around and there's no one there. What was that? Perhaps a spirit? Here at the museum, we have a special relationship with spirits. Let's go back 150 years. If you were standing in the Civic Center area where a museum is located, what would you see? Here's a map of the Civic Center area on the screen. And in this red circle, and this is where the site of our museum was the Yerba Buena Cemetery. So in the mid-19th century, it was a cemetery because the city of San Francisco was relatively small, and this was still on the outskirts of town. So this is what it looked like from this image I found of the actual cemetery. So there are graves rolling down the hill. San Francisco needed more space, and they wanted to build a new city hall. So this is the city hall that was built there. They started in about 1870, and it took about 30 years before the new city hall was actually built. And it seemed to be haunted with delays and mishaps and all sorts of things. In 1899, the building opened. It was finished. And just 7 years later, it was destroyed in the 1906 earthquake. Well, then they decided that the city hall would be built elsewhere. So they excavated here to build a new San Francisco Public Library. And that you saw the image of a skeleton appearing. Well, there were bodies that were left behind because they didn't move all the bodies before they built the new city hall. So there were bodies there. And those spirits that were there perhaps continue to haunt or roam, but also the artifacts in our museum also perhaps are roaming. Many of our artifacts are closely connected to the spirit world. And I'd like to show you this is a tiny netsuke from Japan, and it's based on a Japanese mask that's used in a no drama. So it's really small, but even small, it looks pretty ferocious. And these are ceramic dogs. They're pretty frightening, but actually these clay figures are good spirits because they were placed in Chinese tombs and they were used to scare away evil spirits. But there's one that's particularly frightening, particularly ferocious. This is the demon Barong, a wooden statue about 2 feet high from Bali. Let's take a look at Bali on the map because we're going to spend some time in Bali. Bali is in Indonesia, in Southeast Asia. And if you remember the very first slide that I showed, there was an elephant mask there. And that elephant mask came from Bali. This Barong elephant mask is really beautiful, rare and special, and like many of our objects connected to spirits. There's a very long and careful process of making a Barong mask like this one. And let's start at the very beginning. In traditional Balinese culture, masks hold protective spirits. And who doesn't need protection? It's said that in March of this year, they used a Barong mask and performed a ritual to sort of protect them against the COVID crisis. So, but in Bali, if they need to find protection, you need to have a qualified mask maker and a priest to start the process. A sacred mask is made from special pule trees, and ones that grow from near a cemetery are considered extra special because that's where the ancestral spirits are. So they need to pick an auspicious day. A priest and the mask maker will find a mask that has grown a knot. And these knots are thought to be pregnant. Offerings are made to the tree to ask permission to make a mask. And this is the beginning of a very long process. Here, on another auspicious day, a priest performs more rituals, makes offerings, and a first ceremonial cut is made. Then the wood is turned over to the mask maker and the carving starts. In this picture, the carver on the left is Chokorda Rakatishnu, and he's the artist who made the Barong elephant mask that we're talking about and you saw in the beginning. He comes from a line of mask makers and is carving a Barong Ket mask from a prototype that was made by his grandfather. The Barong is a protective figure that lives in the forest and is the main figure in the Rangda Barong dance, a ritual that is used to bring balance between the forces of good and evil. And here is a completed Barong mask. Now, the Barong mask in Bali is considered quite a lovable and cute figure, and everybody knows them and loves them. Now here, Chokorda Rakatishnu sits with his Barong mask. The Barong mask can take several animal forms, including a tiger, a boar, or like the elephant that we've looked at. This one is known as a Barong Ket. Let's look at more images of the slide of the mask that we have in the museum. This one is not seen often. It's used occasionally when its protective energy is needed. But let's go on with the making of a mask, because this is really quite involved and interesting. Not all masks are sacred, and not all mask makers can make sacred masks. They need to learn the rituals, they need to go through purifications, and it's a very special profession and very honored. The sacred masks and rituals that are performed in Balinese villages are by invitation only. And they're kept quite separate from the tourist world of souvenir mask and performances. But in Bali, any performance is considered offerings to the god. Now, if you were making a souvenir mask, any mask maker probably could do it. Any paint is fine, but for a sacred mask, very special materials and care is taken. Here you can see calcified pig bones are being ground to form the base of the paint. And there may be up to 140 coats of paint, a process that may take 4 months or even longer. Now, here's an unpainted Barong boar mask. In the circle you see, there's a little pivoting rod that protrudes from the side of the boar's head, and this allows the jaw to move. And you could see that the person holding this mask is supporting the lower jaw with his hand. Now, here's a picture of a Barong boar mask in a performance. And in this circle, you can see the arm of the dancer holding the mask in front and moving the jaw. Now, if we were to take our elephant mask and turn it upside down, you'd see some really interesting things. Inside the mask are bells, which will of course jingle when the dance is being performed. And you can see that red pivoting rod. And then on the side, you see these little lever rods, which are used to move the jaws up and down. The main central area is made of wood, and the surrounding areas, leather. You can see stitching there, used to fasten decorative elements to the leather portion of the mask. Chokoda Rakutishnu, the mask maker, has made many, many beautiful masks, and I just have to show you a few. In Bali, these masks, as I said, are sacred. And during festivals and other times of the years, when they're not being used in a performance, they're stored in very special bags, placed in a temple, and you'll see these very elaborate offerings being made of palm leaves or bamboo leaves and fruit, and they're being carried in a temple and being brought to the mask as an offering. Now, during a ritual dance, the spirits are invited into the dancer and the mask. Dancers may actually go into a trance. One dancer has said when the spirit enters, the mask is light, but when it isn't, when the spirit doesn't come, the mask is heavy. A Barong mask and costume is worn by 2 dancers and may weigh as much as 100 pounds. The performance could last all day and into the night. Donning that mask turns the dancer into a supernatural being. Here's an image I want to show you of sort of the Barong Ket on the right, which is this good protective spirit. And on the left is Rhonda, the evil witch. And in this dance, there's a battle between the good and the evil. And this ritual dance dates from the 16th century. Now, Rhonda is really feared. And at the beginning of the dance, she'll enter at the doorway to a temple. And it's always performed with a gamelan orchestra. The Rhonda mask is also stored in a special bag when it's not being used in a performance, but it's often hung in a tree near a cemetery to absorb dark spirits. In the dance, Rangda represents fear and death and stands in that threshold of the temple doorway, which is the separation or the division between the sacred and the spiritual world. So when Rangda appears, the Balinese really feel that the spirit has possessed this being, and they're truly frightened. The dance begins, and I was fortunate to have this video clip of a portion of a Barong dance, and I'd like to show that to So another really important element of a ritual dance are sacred daggers known as krises, and they're used by warrior dancers to battle Rangda. Now, these sacred krises are really lavishly decorated and beautifully made, but in the dance itself, Rangda is so powerful and so full of evil that she is able to force the warrior dancers to turn the krises upon themselves. And she tries to force them to stab themselves. And without the purification and rituals, they could really be harmed. Now, finally, the dancers are sprinkled with holy water by a priest, and then the Barong enters, and together they're able to overcome Rangda. Here's a scene from our museum, an image from our museum of the dance. Rangda enters on the left, and the warriors rush to confront her. Rangda puts them in a trance, forces them to turn their daggers on themselves. There. And then Barong finally enters. And together, they're finally able to overcome Rangda. Now, Rangda's not really defeated because Rangda is not completely evil. So they sort of move Rangda to bring her good side out. And with this ritual dance, there begins to be some balance of good and evil in the world. So this is done whenever there's an important occasion in Bali. They will perform the Barong Rangda dance. Now, our museum is very lucky to have this rare Barong elephant mask. And it seems to be bringing some balance into our museum. And we've been able to open our museum this year. So with this powerful and protective Barong elephant mask, we've increased the forces of good compared to the forces of evil we've seen. And we hope you will come to the museum and see your very favorite artifacts. And here you see in the museum our new hours. We are actually closed on Tuesday and Wednesdays now, open late on Thursdays. So go to the museum website, www.asianaut.org, to reserve your timed entry tickets. And happy Halloween to you. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Larry. It was so great. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to go on to our final story, which will be told live. And we will be hearing from Linda Yamoto. And this story comes from Japan. So without further ado, I want to hand it off to Linda. Please tell us your story.
Great. Thank you, Deb. I'd like to tell you a story that I first learned from Hiroko Fujita. Now, Fujita-san is a wonderful storyteller and educator in Japan, now in her 80s. And it's with her permission that I tell you my version of her story called Melting Grass. Mukashi mukashi, aru tokoro ni, long, long ago, in a small mountain village in Japan, there lived a young man who would soon be turning 16. He lived with his mother, his father, and his older brother. Now, being the second born, not the firstborn son, he knew he would not be inheriting any of the family farm, and thus soon he would have to go out and seek his fortune. So on his 16th birthday, his mother gave him a beautiful hanten jacket that she had made especially for his travels. A hanten jacket is lightweight but warm because it was the fall and the weather would soon be turning cold. Now, she packed him as much food as possible. He put it in his little knapsack over his shoulder, and he went down the road, the dirt road that led from their village down the mountain. It crossed a valley. It climbed another mountain pass. And when he got to the top of that pass, he decided he would take a bit of a rest, eat a bit of his food. So, sitting in the shade of a tree, he was munching on an omusubi, a rice ball, and he could see where he would be going next. The trail went down the mountain, it crossed a meadow, and then climbed another mountain pass. But he noticed coming down that mountain pass was another traveler. He thought, perhaps that man will know if there's any work to be had on the town on the other side of that mountain. I'll wait here for him. And he watched as that traveler came slowly down the mountain pass and made his way into the meadow. So at that point, the young man stood up and waved so that the traveler would see him. The traveler spotted him, waved back, and picked up his pace a bit. But the young man noticed something strange coming out of the forest that surrounded that meadow. Zuru, zuru, nyoro, nyoro, zuru, zuru, nyoro, nyoro. It was an enormous snake, the biggest the young man had ever seen in his life. The head had to have been this big. The young man watched as the snake flicked out its tongue, tasting the air. And he could tell that the snake had picked up the scent of the traveler because it began to move very quickly toward the traveler. Zuru, zuru, nyoro, nyoro, zuru, zuru, nyoro, nyoro. But the snake was behind the traveler. He couldn't see it. Apparently, he couldn't hear it. So the young man jumped up and waved his hands and yelled, Hashire, Hashire, run, run. But the traveler didn't understand. He just waved back and kept walking. So the young man could do nothing but watch helplessly as the snake, zuru, zuru, nyoro, nyoro, zuru, zuru, nyoro, nyoro, grabbed the traveler's head, coiled its body around the traveler, and began to squeeze. The young man could see the traveler trying to get a breath, but each time he breathed in, the snake would squeeze harder and harder and harder. Soon the traveler lay dead on the meadow floor. And then the young man watched with some horror and fascination as the snake opened its mouth wide and began to swallow that traveler from head to toe. He could see the snake's head, and then directly behind the head was an enormous lump, which was the traveler. And then the snake rather slowly zuru, zuru, nyoro, nyoro, moved to another part of the meadow where the young man could see the grass looked a bit different. The blades were taller, it was a darker green, and the snake grabbed a mouthful of the grass, yanked it out of the ground, and swallowed it whole. The snake did this several more times, and the young man watched as that lump, which was the traveler, got smaller and smaller and smaller until it looked like the snake hadn't eaten anything at all. And then the snake, zuru, zuru, nyoro, nyoro, zuru, zuru, nyoro, nyoro, disappeared back into the forest. So the young man gathered up all his things, ran down the trail into that meadow, and he found that patch of grass. And he thought, that meal that the snake ate should have taken him weeks, if not days, to digest. That must be some kind of magic melting grass. And so he picked several handfuls for himself, put in his pouch, and then, looking around for that snake, he ran to the meadow and then on up that next mountain pass. Now, when he got to the next town on the other side, they were having an Aki Matsuri, a fall festival. There were booths set up in the street with games and food for sale. There was odori dancing in the street. And the young man saw a sign that said, "Noodle eating contest today, cash prizes." Oh, not only can I eat as much udon as I want, maybe I will win some money. And so he immediately went to the noodle eating contest. Now, when he got there, there were long rows of tables with bowls of udon noodles and broth, and a contestant behind each bowl. When they rang the bell, ding! Everyone grabbed their bowl, began to eat. Zuru, 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 and then another bowl. Zuru, 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 zuru. The young man was eating so fast, he wasn't even chewing, he was just swallowing the noodles whole. Zuru, 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 zuru. Another bowl. Zuru, 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 zuru. Another bowl. Zuru, 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 zuru. Another bowl. Zuru, 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 zuru. Ding! Well, that bell meant that all the contestants could take a short break. They were each given a small room with a tatami mat on the floor and a curtain for privacy. So the young man went into his room. Oh, I am so full. I don't think I could eat one more noodle. And then he remembered the grass. So, taking out his pouch, he took out a blade of grass and he smelled it. It smelled okay, so he tasted a little. Amu, amu, amu. It tasted okay, so he waited to see how he felt. He felt okay, so he ate some more. Amu, 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 amu. He didn't have much time during the break. Amu, 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 amu. Ding! Now, that bell meant that all the contestants needed to return to their places. And looking down the tables, everyone had returned except for that young man. So they rang the bell again, ding, thinking that maybe he fell asleep and didn't hear the bell. Still no young man. So they went to his room. They pulled open the curtain. They looked in. No young man. What they saw on the tatami mat was his hanten jacket all in a heap, surrounding a massive pile of noodles. For you see, that was magic melting grass. It melted human flesh. Oshimai. That is all.
Oh, so dark and funny. Oh, I love that story, Linda. Every time it just gets me, the twist. What a wonderful twist.
I love stories like that. Yeah. An unexpected ending.
Totally, totally. So actually people are commenting in the chat about the wonderful sound effects, and actually the goosebumps we all have. So how did you come about making those sound effects, and can you teach us some?
Well, I think many of you know that the Japanese have hundreds, if not thousands, of onomatopoeia that are so specific. So the sound that they use for the snake is zuru zuru nyoro nyoro. And a snake actually moves more like this. That doesn't show well on Zoom, so I had to make the snake go zuru zuru nyoro nyoro. So that would be a big snake, zuru zuru nyoro. But you can have a little snake too, zuru zuru nyoro nyoro, zuru zuru nyoro nyoro. And then I thought it was so funny that the sound for slurping noodles is actually part of the same sound, like zuru 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 zuru. And I guess it's kind of that sort of slippery movement sound.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, there must be hundreds of them in the Japanese language. I mean,
there is an onomatopoeia for something soft falling and hitting something hard. Pyong! I mean, it's that specific. Mm-hmm. So that's why there's so many of them. But they're fun. They're really fun.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask all of our participants tonight to come back on screen. Let's see, where did everybody go? Oh, my panelists, great. Hi, welcome back. Great job, all of you. Thank you so much. A lot of preparation. And let's see, we had a question in the chat about, and I'm forgetting what it was. Let me scroll back.
There was a question about the krises I saw.
Thank you. Yes, it was about the krises. Are they purely ceremonial? I think that was what the question was.
I think you could actually use that kris. It's my understanding that men in Bali get a kris when they approach their passage into adulthood, and they carry them with them as a protective element because it's believed they can protect them. I guess even spiritually and actually physically it can protect them. So they're there in our museum, and I hope they're protecting our museum. But there's an interesting aspect about the krises is that they're normally, if they're displayed with the point upwards rather than down, because it's thought they would lose power into the earth if they're pointing down. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, thank you. They're so wonderful. Each one is so detailed. Another, Shirley asks, what was the name of your story, Linda?
Well, Hiroko calls it melting grass. I've kind of called it the Traveler and the Snake story, but if you're going to look for that story, she calls it melting grass.
And she's a living storyteller?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love to tell people a little bit about her. When she was 7 or 8 years old, her family was moved from Tokyo to outside Tokyo because it was during the war, and their father thought they'd be safer there. And to escape kind of like a crazy household with lots of kids and noise, she would go and spend her days with a farmer next door. And this farmer told her hundreds and hundreds of folk tales. And she remembered them and wrote them down as an adult. So there's 7 volumes that she's created.
Great. Yeah, I'd love to read more of her writing. Does she do mostly scary stories or all kinds?
Mm-hmm. All kinds, yeah. Fun kid stories, all kinds.
I wanted to ask, our 2 storytellers and actually Larry too. I mean, do you think that there's a moral to the stories, and what do you think we're intended to take away? Rupa, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, like most of our stories from, our epics and our Puranas are all about the victory of good over evil. And many of them entail demons. So this is also one of them. And eventually, goodness will persist, but sometimes it's a long road to that. And so I think it's very relevant, to our times.
Yeah. How about you, Linda?
Well, as a storyteller, I don't like to tell people what the moral of the story is. I like for them just to listen to it and get out of it what they want to get out of it, because you'd be surprised at the different interpretations people have of that story.
Well, I wonder what interpretations people have. If you have something you want to share in the chat, we'd love to hear what you thought. I guess my take is, is something about greed and or that you nothing is as it seems, right? You have to really question your assumptions maybe, and don't eat too many noodles, says Jeff. Yeah, although we're all craving them now thanks to Linda.
Maybe not.
Larry, have you been able to see Barong dancing, and is that something that is on your bucket list now that you've done this research?
Yeah, there's a lot on YouTube. So if anybody's interested in it, seeing people, you'll see tourist performances. You'll also see actual village performances where people are in trances. So it's really interesting. So, and it just shows you that really there is no absolute of good or evil. So even what we think is the most evil today has some element of goodness in it. So it's like the yin and yang. Everything is changing, constantly changing.
Yeah, I love that philosophy. That's a wonderful point, I think, at which we should probably start to wrap up. Let's hope that things get back into a better alignment. We know a lot is happening in the world, and there's a lot of anticipation and uncertainty about the future. On behalf of all the staff and our wonderful volunteers, let's give them a huge round of applause. Linda, Larry, and Rupa all do this out of love and generosity of spirit, and each of them is involved with our public programs and our school programs, which we're doing virtually right now. And we're figuring it out, and it's a big steep learning curve, but I just have so much admiration for how everyone's been very keen and stepping up. None of us signed up for this, but each of you is really contributing so much to the impact that this museum can have on the community. So on behalf of staff and volunteers and our trustees, we hope that this art and all art can bring you comfort, can bring you protection, and some tools to help you navigate the world. Every object has a story to tell. So with that, I'd like to say farewell and wish you all and your families a safe, warm, and peaceful Halloween weekend.